We're just going to check out some videos. So you're going to see some laughable moments from liberals and some laughable moments from conservatives, left and right, Republican, Democrat, whichever labels you want to use to distinguish these two sides. We're going to be watching videos that kind of point to both of them and maybe find some things that we can laugh about each other. So yeah, caption here is, well, you can't say I don't have a uterus. So we're going to obviously see somebody interacting with somebody that's on the heavier or the liberal side of things.
You don't have a uterus, you don't get to make a decision.
Did you just tell me I don't have a uterus?
It will never happen to you. It will never happen to you. Are you telling me that you have a uterus?
Well, you couldn't tell me I don't if I claimed it. My pronouns are uterus owner male.
So the weird thing about this is just like in her complaint about him talking about whatever he's talking about, I'm assuming it's something that's going to be about abortion, I guess. But she's saying if he doesn't have a uterus, he doesn't get to have an opinion, which is funny because that same party, that same sect of ideology also says that women aren't limited to whether they have a uterus or not, because there are women without uteruses, and then there are also trans women who don't have uteruses. So it's funny that, during this argument, her distinction is the uterus.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yeah.
When I grew up, calling someone queer was like a slur. Can you tell me what that means? I mean.
That's honestly a valid question. It's a valid take because I grew up in the same thought process. Like as I was getting older, like you don't call people queer; it's a bad thing. But now I understand that it's a label that people in the LGBTQ use to identify themselves. So I think it's a valid question to ask. What exactly does that mean to you as someone part of that group?
I mean that sincerely. And how is it different than just saying you're lesbian or bisexual or gay?
So it can be different for everyone because gender, sexuality, it's a spectrum just like anything else. And for me personally, I like everyone.
No, but what does queer mean though?
Queer, it's just a label.
Which, okay, I understand what she's saying. She's saying it's like an all-encompassing label. But as someone who's outside of that community, I guess you would want to have definite terms, especially if it's switching from an insult into a regular nomenclature. Then it's like, I need to know when I'm using this because I don't want to accidentally insult somebody. I'm not saying that's the perspective he's coming from, but I'm saying that could be a more genuine, valid perspective to be coming from, just trying to figure out what the word means. And then she says it's a label. Well, a lot of things are labels. You know what I mean? Like if something's all encompassing, like fruit, you can still have a definition of what a fruit is. No pun intended at all. I didn't mean to do that. But we know the difference between a fruit and a vegetable because of seeds, I believe, is the differentiation. Like is the tomato a vegetable or a fruit? But even though fruit is an all-encompassing category, we still have a definition for it.
What does the label mean?
It's different for everyone.
Okay. I'm not trying to put you as a trap, though. I mean this because when I grew up, if I called somebody queer, I would get in trouble. Just give me like a working definition.
Yeah, so queer is just something that you identify as with your sexuality. It can be related to gender, too.
Right, but how do you know once you achieve queer? Like, what is the, like, can you give me, saying that anybody can be it doesn't tell me what that thing is. That makes sense, though?
It's literally just an identity.
Right, okay. But,
right, and the danger in this, right, and she admitted, slowly you get somebody to admit, like, the simplicity in their ideology, and this can happen on both sides, the simplicity of their knowledge of something that they themselves are following, right? So when she says it's just an identity, it's like, okay, so you're just using it because it almost brings you to the circle of like, okay, but you're using this identity. You can't actually define what this identity means opposed to all the other identities that are within your community. So what does this one mean? You say it's just an identity. Well, that makes me feel like it only resonates with you because it's a vague label. That's another word for I don't really know who I am, which is fine. But I do think it's important to note that when you're a person that is in these identity crisis scenarios, you end up doing things like joining socialist or nationalist cults. It can go either way,
Right, but like what is that identity? For example, if I were to say I'm a conservative, let me give an example.
Yeah.
A conservative is someone who believes in small government, strong borders, American exceptionalism, the Constitution. How would you then give a definition of queer that someone looking at could say, oh, that is queer, like connect the dots?
So, I'm gay, right?
Okay, no, that's good. So,
Yeah.
so what's the difference then gay and queer?
And there it is. There it is. First off, I commend her for the fact that she shrugged her shoulders because she doesn't know. And that is fine. It is fine not to know things. But I think that if you're going to stand up there and say that you identify as the thing, you should know what it is because it's what you're claiming you are. That's crazy to just identify as something you have no idea what it means.
The
Think
whole
about it.
point of it is that it has a different definition for everyone.
And that's also fair because I understand the nuance of what she's talking about. She's trying to express the fact that it's a general overarching term, but where does the line begin and end with a queer? Just like we have a place where fruit is an overall identifying term, but we do have a line in the sand for what it means and what's not a fruit. You know what I mean? Like a Snickers isn't a fruit because it decided it was. Again, they're not sentient. And I guess that's the difficulty there because these are sentient labels and there's a lot of feeling involved. There's a lot of feeling and not science or hard hitting definitions, you know?
Is the Earth round or flat?
Earth's flat.
Do you think the Earth is round or flat?
I know we didn't go to the moon.
Damn.
We didn't go to the moon?
Damn. Bro, hit him with that. Bro, hit him like, I don't know if it's round or flat, but I know we ain't go to the moon.
Go to the moon?
Why do you say that?
Because you can't get out of the atmosphere.
Round or flat?
I'm not really sure.
You're not sure? Could be flat?
Could be.
Or flat?
Well, you know the answer to that. Can you tell me what you think?
Please answer me, please.
No.
The classic, tell me what you think. Like, I can't answer for you. You got to do your own research. Rob says this 100% flat. Now, hear me out. I'm always willing to hear you out, Rob. I'm always willing to hear anything out.
Because I want to know. Tell me. Because
I believe the Earth is round.
from NASA's pictures, right? Yeah.
See, look, he already knew what route he was going to go with this. He said, you tell me. You know the answer. You tell me. From NASA, right? NASA told you it was? Bro, without half the efforts of NASA, you wouldn't even know to question that.
Okay. And you know of CGI, right?
I've heard of CGI, yeah.
Yeah. So I believe in the Bible and Genesis under the dome. It plainly tells you there, under a firmament, dome. So it's as flat as a pancake.
Is the Earth round or flat?
If somebody has an explanation that's based on faith, I have no problem with that. You know what I mean? It's fair enough. It's like, okay, fair enough. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. Who's to say it's not all under the dome and space and the dome can exist as one, you know? I watched a whole documentary on like flat earthers called, I think it was called The Curve or something like that, but there's definitely people on all sides that believe it's flat.
Tell me 3 Democratic policies that you support.
Inflation Reduction Act, American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Law, the PACT Act, the Chips and Science Act. I think it's good that Biden pulled out of...
Boom. And see, I like to point out these micro things that happen in these interviews and stuff. He asked him to name some policies. Bro named off some policies. That's all he was required to do. He wasn't required to elaborate on them or anything else, right? He named off policies. And while naming off these policies, already this guy has a problem with it.
Out of Afghanistan.
Now he mentions Afghanistan after the dude already showed disdain for the policies that he named.
I can go on.
No. I get.
Wow.
Smug. The smug attitude is crazy.
Okay, would you like to talk about the pullout of Afghanistan?
Why did you feel bothered that I just listed policies I think are good?
Because
I think it's great that he lowers prescription drug costs.
you don't know enough about those policies.
So one...
How can he gauge how much he knows about the policies based on him just naming them off? He might have still named off a policy that had a good and bad to it, and he thought, okay, here's the good, here's the bad with the policy. I think the good outweighs the bad. Just simply him naming them off does not signify that he doesn't know enough, so that dude just decided that the guy didn't know enough.
One of them in the Inflation Reduction Act is capping the cost of insulin for Medicare recipients at $35 out of pocket per month. And I think that's really good. I don't think seniors should be...
I think one of the big problems, sorry to pause, but I think one of the big problems with all these policies, when one side is starting to ramble off about a policy, right, the other side typically will know some things that are negative about that policy. It's not a matter of like, oh, you're dumb for supporting that policy. It's like, I support it for the reason that you would support it if the other part wasn't bad.
Be having themselves price gouged. Now Medicare will negotiate drug prices. I think that's really good because of Joe Biden and Democrats.
I think Joe Biden is an illegitimate president.
See, that got taken to a whole different place. I know he's going off a tangent because the guy mentioned, simply name dropped Joe Biden, but it just disregarded the whole beginning of the conversation, and now it's about personal preference of president.
I think the election was stolen, and I think he's going to be killed for his treason. How about that?
He said when he was running that he wouldn't
defund the police, and he's done that.
Biden has defunded the police? Where?
Well, I mean, he hasn't defunded them, but he's defunded a lot of the police. And
that doesn't make sense. He hasn't defunded them, but he's defunded a lot of them. What does that mean? He either did or he didn't.
Because that is done on a citywide level, not the national level.
That's true. But I mean, overall, I think that this is the scariest times that we have lived in.
For starters, the AK-15.
AK-15 is crazy. They need to drop that in Black Ops 7.
And I agree with banning fully semi-automatic guns.
We're banning fully semi-automatic guns. I think there are an incredible amount of Americans out there that just don't even know the nomenclature around guns. You don't have to be an expert to just simply understand. You need every American should at least know the difference between fully automatic and semi-automatic.
Are you for gun control?
Yeah.
Who should control the guns?
Who should control the guns? Probably the government.
Do you trust the government?
No.
Yo, that's the craziest.
What would you say is an assault rifle?
Oh, the AK-15. And
that's so crazy how many people are referring to it as an AK-15.
When police officers shoot, a lot of the times they miss anyway.
I just want you on the camera.
Yes, a gun ban is absolutely what's necessary. I think that we need to start from scratch.
The thing about this is just like, it's not physically possible at this point. Tell me exactly what your plan is to have like police say, hey, turn in your guns, turn in your weapons. How many people aren't going to turn in their guns? And now we're talking about making all of those people criminals?
People who think that it's okay to kill an intruder into their house.
Many states have laws around this, you know? For instance, like one state, there's a lot of states with stand your ground, but the ones that don't have stand your ground, typically, even within stand your ground states, a lot of the time, if the person is running away from you and you shoot them, which they can tell through ballistics and things like that, oftentimes you're going to end up in handcuffs too while the investigation is ongoing, just because. First off, why did you break into my house? What am I supposed to use? Non-lethal? I'm not saying burglars should get the death penalty, but I'm just saying, like, if you break into my house, I have no understanding if you're just trying to rob me or if you're trying to hurt me or you're going crazy trying to hurt me. I don't know if you're hired or what. And, you know, quite frankly, what am I going to do? Sit there and interview you and ask you why you're there? Because if you're there to hurt me, I don't think I'm going to get very far in the interview.
I believe in the ban of all guns. I don't think it's necessary for civilians to carry around firearms and things that can kill people in an instant.
The reality of the situation is we're way past any ability to ban all guns. So I do think if there's any type of conversation they want to have, it needs to be past the point of banning all guns because you cannot physically do it in this country. It is too late. Understand that. It is too late. That ship has sailed.
Sure. What was your name again? I'm sorry.
I don't think I told you. My name's Mercury.
Nice to meet you. Okay, I've been asked that question a lot. First of all, that question should not even have to be asked, but when people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilizations stop talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with,
and this is a valid point,
it's a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. What we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option.
You think that's not emotional violence?
How is this? What is emotional violence, by the way? I don't know what that is.
If simply having the conversation makes you feel like it's an attack, then you're not mature enough to have a dialogue in the society. Because words are the most unoffensive thing of all things that you could have going on. Words can be offensive, but when it comes to being an adult in a democracy, you have to let words flow. That way you can understand perspective, therefore improving the democratic process and the culture as a whole. So I think once we get into this area of calling things emotional violence, you're just making it hard on yourself because you're limiting the conversations you're willing to have. Do you think words can be violent or just capable of inciting it? I believe words can incite violence. If the next follow-up question would be something like, should people be responsible for their words that incite violence? You should be allowed to say certain words, all words, but I also do think it is possible to cause a negative reaction from your words, and depending on what the case is, case by case, it needs to be a case-by-case scenario, how you're going to be held responsible for that. In the same way that if you call somebody stupid, they might hit you, but you have a right to call them stupid. They don't have a right to put their hands on you, but there is a consequence to your words. A consequence nonetheless, you know what I mean? It's not to say that free speech means consequence-free speech. Like, if your words are intentionally reflecting the need to cause harm to somebody, if their words are truly for a call to action on harm, then yes, that's a problem.
What is emotional violence, by the way? I don't know what that is.
It is harm intentionally perpetrated on another another human being that is intentionally targeted at their emotional well-being.
She said it's words that are intentionally targeted to harm somebody emotionally, right? So now we have the problem of what does that mean? She's trying to essentially call his stand there, his panel, public panel, emotionally violent, and saying that the intention is to cause emotional harm to other people. When you come in with the perception that you're being attacked, you're missing the point that it's just for mutual understanding. Even if nobody has any intention of changing their mind, whoever's on the right or the wrong, it doesn't matter. But if somebody has no intention of changing their mind, but you guys are just simply putting your points out there, that's fine and dandy. That should be okay.
Okay, so feelings mean nothing to me.
Which isn't a fair statement to say because, you know, feelings should mean something, but they shouldn't mean everything. Facts. It don't matter if you're Democrat or conservative, I'm gonna dig in my butt regardless. Yeah, I don't agree with him saying feelings mean nothing. Feelings do mean something. Feelings are to be taken account of.
Isn't why we had the First Amendment to try to push our boundaries and to hear things that might make you mildly uncomfortable?
This doesn't make me mildly uncomfortable.
Does it make you very uncomfortable?
It makes me angry.
You know, the simple conversation makes you angry, and you're choosing not to acknowledge that it makes you uncomfortable. I mean, like you're shutting down the dialogue by just not participating, but also at the same time you want to participate by saying how much you don't like it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You're either participating in the conversation or you're not.
Guys, can I ask you guys, do you think systemic racism exists in America? No?
No.
Can I give you my definition of what I think it is? Can I just give you my definition? Okay, so I don't think there are any laws on the books being racist to black people. That doesn't exist in modern day America. But 60 years ago, in the 60s, when my grandparents were alive.
I grew up
Okay,
in the 60s and
so
70s, and the bullshit they're spreading that
Okay,
out
so
there,
wait,
it didn't
let me
happen.
finish. So you grew up in the 60s and 70s. In your lifetime, redlining laws were on the books. You know what redlining laws are? It said that black people couldn't take out loans to buy homes. All of these books, or all these laws were on the books.
Who owns the banks? Who owns the banks? Bring
George
the mic back. Who owns the banks, son?
I don't know who. George
Damn.
Soros? Who are you gonna say?
The Rothschilds
The
and the
Rothschilds?
Kissingers.
Okay, let's take it.
They own the banks, right?
Her point is the Rothschilds own the banks. So she's saying it's not the American people, it's not the American government that did it. The Rothschilds, who, if you're in the conspiracy world, you believe that, you know, these people own everything and they're trying to move forward some agenda, right? That's the gist of things, right? My rebuttal to that would simply be just like, okay, well, the owner of the banks doesn't necessarily negate what he's saying. I'm just going off of her argument. Her argument was who owns the banks. Well, saying who owns the banks doesn't change up the effects of the things that happened. You know what I mean?
All I know is that what's going on is reverse racism. Okay? That's what
I disagree with this. Reverse racism doesn't exist. It's racism. It perpetuates this perception, this idea that you can only be racist towards some people. And some people will argue this whole thing about semantics and definitions, but like literally racism is racism. When you think other races are inferior to you, let's stop with all the semantics, you know what I mean? There is no reverse racism in my opinion. Reverse racism was a white supremacist tactic that implied that civil rights for minorities adversely restricted rights of white people. And then let's just remember, if this was like a calculated tactic, right? We have to also understand that not all people know of it that way. Like this dude who's saying reverse racism, I think he's saying that because he's just trying to send home the point that he, as a white dude, has experienced racism, which is a valid thing. It can happen. Everybody can be subjected to racism. I grew up in an area where I experienced a lot of racism as a kid. You know what I mean? Like from other kids, which then you say they learned it from their parents and they learned it from TV. Like racism is not that complicated. The problem with Republicans, they would touch more base with minorities if they talked about some of the racial issues more and not from a defensive standpoint. But I think that the left has put them into this hole where they feel like if they do talk about it, they do have to be defensive. The left tends to talk about programs to fix racism, right? They do that a lot. That's what the whole identity politics is pretty much. Where I think a lot of the right-leaning stuff is more so, I don't believe racism exists because I want people to work hard, right? But I think that if the right side took the job of helping minorities improve their communities, they'd have the perfect mindset to motivate the communities to do that. But instead, what they do is ignore some of the points that are correct that these communities have about how they're feeling affected by these things. Are there any laws currently that are putting people down racially? No. But we do have residual effects of certain communities in rural, suburban, and urban neighborhoods that are just shitty in America. Places that are just shitty in America simply because of our past. And if we're going to move forward, that's fine. But we need ideas to improve these communities, but we also need to acknowledge that these communities are like this probably from our past. We shouldn't improve the communities because they're minority-written communities. We need to improve them because it's America, which makes people feel separate, because then you feel like you can't help in those communities because you're not part of it. I feel like that's how people end up feeling. Minorities want to be heard for the actual true history that's happening in this country. And the Republicans just want to move forward, right? I think a lot of the jargon that's used from the right tends to diminish some of the problems that happen that people still want to like talk about. Not talk about it just to talk about it, but like, hey, can you acknowledge this though? Like one of the biggest things that disgusted me was when Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. It's like, that's the most racist shit I've heard in a long while. That was a problem for me. That was a big problem for me because that just like pigeonholes people and makes it seem like, oh, black people only like these type of things. White people only like these type of things. I don't care about your demographic stats and this and that and the third. At the end of the day, you need to treat Americans as Americans, like we're all different individuals with the same goal. Everybody has their stereotypes. Everybody has their, stereotypes and shit like that we fit into. But people are different once you come down to everyday conversation, you know?
Redlining laws existed in your lifetime that were racist against black people.
Can I give you a
Can you
story?
see?
Okay,
Wait, hold on. Don't touch the mic. Hold
Let
on.
me tell you why.
Yeah.
We lived in a building with 40 people in it. We were mixed, okay? There was a black super. He had no family. My family fed him and took care of him.
What is
They
it supposed to
put the
tell?
food down.
What is it supposed to tell me?
Then no, what you're hearing in media likes to extravagate bullshit.
Why didn't they say this is a Nazi party?
She's bringing up that story to just make it understood that her and her family aren't racist. And she's doing that because the opposite side has made her feel like simply having an opinion on these things makes her racist. But the problem here is that she's not even equipped for the conversation that he's trying to have with her. And you'll see both sides, left and right, do this to people. A lot of the problems that affect minorities are actually poor problems, and there just happens to be more poor minorities. So if you can understand it from a poor perspective, you can understand it from a minority perspective. The only difference is that you add in racism. If you can acknowledge that, you can then convince people to start listening to how to improve their community. There's a responsibility to improve the community before you can expect the government to do certain things. You know, you have to take account for yourself, but not ignore some of the things that you were born into. I don't know if it's the most perfect thought, but like, might be a horrible example, but if you can understand that country and hip hop are equally American, you can kind of get the point I'm trying to make across, which is my problems are your problems are mine. Do I think the African American community has good leaders? Currently, right now, I don't think we have good enough leaders. I don't. Because it seems like right now we have a generation, my generation, I'm 95, so I'm right in between millennial and Gen Z. I'm 95, so I'm literally smack in the middle. I don't think we have good enough leaders because these leaders are from a generation from like Gen X, and they're still inspired by the people that were trying to really separate and be very pro-black, which at times we need. We needed that probably 10 years ago. Can you be a Hitler admirer but not a Nazi? Yes, I believe you can, simply because what do you mean by that? You know, is it a weird fucking statement? Yes, I agree. Is it something that's a red flag? Yeah. But am I going to call you Hitler? It's like when you call somebody a liar, you should have the proof. There's certain things that you say in the world that you need good, honest proof for. The gravity at which you call somebody Hitler has to mean something. It has to actually mean something. You can't preemptively use that because then you're going to lose people's attention span, because then you become someone who exaggerates, potentially. And maybe in the first year, he really does become Hitler-like. But until then, you have to make sure that shit is real, or else people will not take serious the other things you say. It's like crying wolf. I'm not saying you are, because you're not inherently lying. You're not trying to lie. But people will have the perception that you are somebody who's going to be fugazi about some things.
You don't have a problem with legal immigration, right?
No.
No. Oh my God.
No.
Yeah.
I have no problem at all with legal immigration.
Yeah. Oh my
We were all once immigrants ourselves, so I think they should make it a little easier.
What do you think about Biden's new proposal to double the amount of visas to South America?
Oh, hell
That's
no.
awful. That's going to destroy everything. We're going to be in a biggest mess, and there's no way we can afford that. It can't happen.
So just for the record.
See, that's not fair. So what they're trying to pose here is like this is like a gotcha, right? This is a left gotcha on the right. He's trying to say you guys have no problem with legal immigration, and then he brings forth, what if we double the visas to South America? And they're saying no. The gotcha there is that they're saying they like legal immigration, but then they say they don't want to double the visas, which to make this some type of gotcha isn't fair, because if they want us to have the same amount of visas and they're fine with it, that should make sense. And they're saying they want to, if you're saying you want to double the visas and we're saying our economy can't support that, that's a fair point to make. They're still saying, yeah, we're still for fair legal immigration. We just don't want to double the visas. I don't know what the amount of visas are, but it's not fair to make that the gotcha, the fact that they don't want to double them. This comment here says they said you can come here, just don't come here. Proof that it's just racism. Oh, the contradictions. But like, there's no contradiction. They're saying they believe in legal immigration, but they don't want to double the visas. That's a perfectly rational sentence. But if let's say we're allowed 5 people. Okay, well, can we let 10 people? No, 5 is the limit.
What is Harris's biggest accomplishment to date as vice president?
I don't know. I don't feel comfortable doing this anymore.
She was a very good vice president.
That's an interesting question. Getting to vice president.
I have to do more research on her, honestly. I'm just glad to see a woman of color in charge for once. That's it.
I just want to touch on the woman that said, I just want a woman in. When it's your person, I can understand why people might feel that way. Is it a good way to be? No. But I can understand with, the impulse to make your lifetime a period of historic value. That's all that is. You can't take it as any more than that. It doesn't make her an idiot. It doesn't make her anything else. It's just like, that's what she went for. It's people, there's 300 million of us. People are going to vote for different reasons, and that's what they ran on. So it's not the best thing to be voting for a person just because of that. But I do understand wanting to be part of history. But she also did admit that she needs to do more research, which is also fair. But she wanted to give an answer, so she gave it.
I haven't followed her political career that closely.
There's only so much time in a day, and you have passions and interests and family to spend time with, So if somebody were to ask you about your political candidate and they asked you a question, if you don't feel like you have enough research, then you can still vote. You can still have your opinions on certain things that you have researched and things you haven't. But I'm just saying, don't be so hard pressed on your opinions if you know you haven't done the proper research. Yeah, the immigrants, legal, illegal, add to the economy, negative and positive. That's just a reality. It's just people existing. So of course it adds, I'm not saying that sarcastically. I'm saying like genuinely, there's positive and negative additions. So
these extreme nations, they don't treat women with respect.
We treat women with respect here.
Yes, we do.
That's an American ideal.
Yeah.
Tell me about your shirt. What's it say?
It says, Hillary sucks, but not like Monica.
Hilarious. So we were talking about treating women with respect.
It's an American ideal that we treat women with respect.
That is crazy. You know what I mean? And he did it to himself. And it's moments like that I wanted to do this in the first place, because there are people on the left and the right that have this behavior of cognitive dissonance, irony, and things like that. We saw a lot more about the left earlier, but this is just to show it's on both sides. So don't forget that. I could have made this a whole entire compilation of people just screaming and yelling, but I didn't want to do that because we're all watching that anyway. And that's not the majority of things. I think it's way more important to show how dumb we all are and how we all fall into these traps when our guy's not winning or our guy did win. So